Hello, everybody, and welcome to the January installment of Why Can't We Be Friends? We are under the umbrella of GTX Connect, and we are in partnership with the Dell Foundation Community Driven Initiatives. We are doing a program this evening on Cops of Color. And we have several panelists with us this evening to field the questions that you guys want to ask. I'm going to go ahead and have Chuck post the Slido application link again in the chat. So I will direct you all to the chat now, and you can go ahead and click on that. That will give you access to questions that have already been asked. You can vote on those questions, or you can go ahead and type in your own questions that you would like to be asked. And with that, we are going to have our panelists go ahead and give us a little introduction of themselves.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Delta Jolly. Formerly Officer Jolly. I just retired last July from Georgetown Police Department. I have newly taken on the role as one of the criminal justice teachers at Georgetown High School for GISD, and loving every bit of it. I was an officer for Georgetown for almost 9 years, and currently a professor at Austin Community College for 4 years now, and starting my new path down with high school. So it's been a blast starting this new adventure, and a JV cheer coach, and having fun being a mom.
My name is Lamar Claypool. I'm a chaplain for Travis County Sheriff's Office. I've been there nearly 10 years, but before that, I was a chaplain for Mohawk Correctional Facility in Rome, New York, with the Department of Corrections of New York. And from there, I was a chaplain with the Rhode Island Department of Corrections. I was in maximum security. So that's, and then I forgot to say that I was a police chaplain in Michigan City, Indiana, back in the late.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Daniel Troyer. I'm originally from New York City, spent my first 34 years of life there. I was a police officer in New York. I served in East Harlem for 10 years, did an early vested retirement, moved to Texas, and got back into policing. I've been serving for a year now with the Georgetown Police Department. The last 5 months of that actually on the street on patrol.
I was muted because my dogs were in the background. Oh. Like I said before, welcome to Texas.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Right. Good. No more snow shoveling.
No.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead. I will be going back and forth between the Zoom screen and the Slido screen. So I have gone ahead and gone into Slido, and I am looking at the questions, and I'm just going to kind of start from the top. The first question, it says, over the last few years, what assumptions about law enforcement have you had to deal with? So I think they're being very specific in that question, wanting to know like the last few years with the pandemic, with kind of the social struggles that the country is going through. This is a big question to get you guys started off. So whoever would like to go first, any of you can answer this, all of you can answer it. It's however you guys want to go ahead. So whoever would like to go first.
All right, not everybody all at once, right?
I'll go first. I'll go first. Well, I haven't, I've only in the last 5 months gotten back on the street after a 6-year break in service policing. And in that time, I haven't dealt personally with any direct, I guess, assumptions or people saying anything towards me personally, but you could see in the news media, social media, it's in the zeitgeist in general. There's a lot of hostility towards law enforcement, and there's a strong narrative that law enforcement is unjustly oppressive to minorities and certain groups. And that is something that I have dealt with in the past, not just in this current post-COVID, post-George Floyd era we find ourselves in. I worked at Zuccotti Park several times during the Occupy Wall Street movement and have been through several waves of anti-police protests in New York City over the course of my time there. So even though there's been a big strong resurgence of it, it's nothing new to me. It's something I dealt with the politics of New York the entire time I was there. You do have people that will, in the course of your duties, scream at you and call you racist, or while you're conducting an investigation and you're just asking routine questions about what happened here, one of the people involved will just make a blurt out statement, oh hey, you're only bothering me because I'm whatever group and you're a racist. And it's just part of the job in this climate to just do your best to navigate that, explain to people, look, I'm not trying to offend you in any way. I'm just doing my job, and I would just appreciate it if you would cooperate. And you can, if you are a minority, you could bring them to that. You could bring that to their attention. Their attention. That's not always effective. I worked in a predominantly Black neighborhood, Black and Hispanic neighborhood, when I was working in New York, and even though the precinct I worked for was also predominantly minority, it did little to dissuade the population there that we were out to get them because they were minorities. So it's just something that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, depending on the community you work in. And I think most police officers, if you're working in a large city or if you're working in a minority area, even in the academy training, they'll speak to this, they'll train you to speak to you how to deal with this, and try to have open lines of communication with people. Don't take things personally. Don't take it personally when people call you racial epithets. You have to be professional at all times and do your best to accommodate the public, make them feel safe and secure, and address the issue at hand. And even though they may be getting upset and shouting at you, you have to be professional and you can't do it back. And again, don't get offended. I mean, I've been personally called every racial epithet there is in the course of my duties, and all of them except for one person was a minority. I've only ever had one white person actually shout epithets at me. So that's my experience.
Yeah, what's unfortunate is, like Officer Troyer said, it is cyclical. It just because it goes away one time, it never quite disappears. And with working here in Georgetown, both on patrol and in my last position as a community engagement officer, I did have the luxury of having a little bit more contact with the community and being able to have some of those harder conversations, mainly because I wasn't being pushed by the clock. I wasn't being pushed by, what next call is holding in the stack. I didn't have to move on. So I was able to have those conversations with our community members. And just again, just to agree with Officer Troyer, yes, there are going to be some people who want to call you every name in the book. And it happens, it doesn't matter how friendly you are, how nice, polite, kind you try to be and explain how to do your job. Unfortunately, it is the nature of the beast. But when we take our oath of office, we say, hey, we're not going to be offended. As much as it may hurt us personally, we can't be offended. And I've taken that into teaching. I can't be offended. I can't, have my own personal opinions because things that I say and do, affect the kiddos that I'm teaching, So I think being able to have the training on the street and on patrol like I did before moving into the current career, kind of, it prepared me for it. I have this conversation with my students because they see the news, they see the media, and they see all the things that are happening and they want my opinion. And I said, listen, our job as officers is to take care of our community. I understand what it looks like. I said, but there's always two sides of the coin. And not only that, I said, we talk about perspective. You know, there's videos everywhere. Everybody has a phone. Everybody's recording. We've gotten a little too, I guess, reckless with immediacy and how readily available things are. And we're convicting people on both sides of the coin before we have all the information. And I think that when I talk to my students about it, I said, listen, it's, you know how, especially us women, we want to take that good angle, you know, get all the, you know, thinness as we can into the picture. But when we talk about, you know, videos and stuff like that with law enforcement and who's on what side, who's right, who's wrong, you know, depending upon the angle of the camera, you're going to see some things, you're not going to see other things, and you might just get the good shot, you might just get the bad shot. So it's, you know, we talk about, you know, how you can't take everything at face value. You need to do your own research about it and make sure that you're making yourself knowledgeable about all the situations, not just what is being put out there.
You know, I find it interesting. I had two shouldn't say two incidents, but the first is I had a sergeant share with me while he was patrolling in Austin during a event. A citizen approached him and accused him of some things that really he didn't do, but because he was there, the gentleman decided to make statements that were not his doing, but the activities that have transpired over the past months. And so he told me that he had to keep a professional attitude and always address, he addressed this citizen, and he would say, sir, I'm just here patrolling. I want to make sure that you're safe getting across the street. And so he made sure that he was professional. The second was situation that I experienced, that as a chaplain, I'm sort of everywhere, central booking, when people are booked in Austin. And then also I'm able to do ride outs. And so I pretty much put my uniform on. It was pretty much similar to the officers the deputies that were out patrolling. And I specifically had my chaplain jacket on. So we stopped at a store, and he didn't need to get anything. I went into the store. So as I was walking into the store, I was receiving looks, and interesting looks. It was sort of odd, and I could feel it. And when I went into the store, when I came out of the store, I was receiving looks. And no matter, they didn't care if I had the word chaplain on the back. I had the patch. I had the Travis County patch on, and that was it. And I received some interesting looks. So that was my first time being able to identify with correctional officers, deputies, and policemen.
Okay. So I want to go ahead and let everyone know that Chuck posted the Slido link in case people tried it and were not able to get to the questions page. So I just want to draw attention to that in the chat. If you were unable to submit a question or vote for questions and you still want to do that, then you're welcome to try to do that again. And with that, I will go on to the next question, which is, okay, so this one says, for Officer Troyer, do you see differences in the South from New York in being an officer?
Yes, I do. Number one, a lot more paperwork here. But and another thing to get used to is I was used to having a partner. We always had 2-man units in New York here on patrol. The officer is by himself in the vehicle. So that's nothing to get used to. But a big difference here culturally that I'm finding in Georgetown compared to New York is people are a lot friendlier. Much of the community here really appreciates the police department and the work that it does, and they're always sending food gifts to the station. Often if we get lunch and we go to pay our bill, we're told, oh, somebody already paid for it, don't worry about it. And a lot of people just saying, hey, I appreciate your service, thank you for everything you do. And working in East Harlem, that was not the case. We did not get that. In fact, when I remember the 2-day orientation I had before my first day working the streets in New York, we were briefed about not going to the nearest IHOP in uniform, because if you do, they will put powdered glass in your food. So it was a very different atmosphere. The only people that would really greet us like that were very young children and the elderly. Yeah, that's a big marked difference. Another big difference, which I appreciate and I'm sure the public will appreciate, is that policing here, although I've been here briefly, from what I've seen, it's a lot more, how should I put it, based on real world, like the administrative staff is interested in basic real world results and a good relations with the community, and generally trying to solve their problems, as opposed to, not that New York wasn't trying to do that, but they were a little too data driven, a little too driven by metrics, quotas. And perhaps it's inevitable with a city that size, over 8 million people. It's bigger than the population of some nations. But with a smaller, much smaller city, they don't rely on that as much. And I think that's a lot healthier for a police culture.
That's actually so nice to hear.
Mm.
And if anybody else would like, even though it was directed toward Officer Troyer, if anybody else has an experience or something they would like to add to that kind of, and I think that they specifically said New York because you had identified New York, but if you have experiences, I think the real question is kind of like up north versus down in the South, right? So if anybody else has those kind of experiences. And the other thing that struck me was when you said children and elderly, and the first thing I thought was, oh, the smartest people in our culture, that's who, right? Yeah, the children are the elderly. That's the people who are the smartest. So, but go ahead if anyone else has anything to add. Okay. All right. That's perfectly fine. So let's see. Now I'm kind of going through, and more people are voting. So questions pop up to the top if more people vote on them. And so the next question we have is, what would you tell your rookie self to expect in your career? So if you could speak to your rookie self, what would you tell them?
Well, I will tell you, at least in the academy, they told us initially, you're going to lose a lot of friends. And I was like, no, not my friends, not the people I went to high school with. Oh yeah, I lost a good chunk of them, probably about 3/4 of people that I went to high school and had made friends with, even in college. And then I got to realizing, I was like, well, maybe I didn't know them that well. But something I would tell my rookie self, just because when I first started out, I took a lot of calls to heart. Not that it was a fault, but I held on to a lot of things. And I think I needed to learn how to take each call, handle that call, and then move on to the next one instead of trying to figure out how to save the world. With being on patrol, you don't have time, depending on the call load, call volume, what time of day it is. Are we working crashes? Is this going on? Is that going on? School zones, all sorts of things that are happening, that or could be happening throughout a shift. Sometimes you don't have the time to let that call dwell mentally, even though you might be physically away from that call for service, not to let it, marinate mentally and just move on. And I know easier said than done, but had I learned that or mastered that art in my first 2 years or so, I think I would have had a little bit more hair than I have now. But I think being able to transition from that officer wanting to help everybody into community engagement where I could help more people, it allowed me a little bit more latitude to do what I wanted to do.
What would I tell my rookie self? I guess I would, growing up in New York, I knew that I was well familiar with the political culture there. And I expected a good degree of hostility from certain portions of the public, but the scale of it and the eventual effects it would have did come to surprise me. And I guess I would just tell my rookie self, hey, if I had that crystal ball or could go back in time, I would say, just, prepare yourself for this. It's going to get very bad. And specifically my 10-year time in New York, because from 2005 to 2015, when I served, time span I served, things changed a lot. So we went from being a culture where our leadership and the city government was encouraging us to be very, very proactive, to reacting to a lot of court cases and deepening hostility, to not be proactive. And really only, if you get a call, go there, you do the absolute bare minimum. Short of that, just try to disappear. Don't do too much. That's what it eventually turned into. And I know it's like that in a lot of large cities across America today. So I guess I would tell myself that this is what's going to happen, and just mentally prepare yourself for that, and know that the things you're doing now won't be, acceptable later. And I'm just talking about things like, if you get a call, when I started, if you got a call from someone, hey, this guy robbed me. I was walking down the street. He put a gun in my face, and took my wallet. Well, earlier in my tenure, we would get a description of him, put that description over the radio for our colleagues to hear, and everyone else would canvass the area searching for a guy that fits that description. If they found someone that fit that description, they would stop that person, and they would do what we call show up, and have the victim come over, and we would say, hey, is this the guy that robbed you? And that's something that completely stopped after 2013. We stopped doing that after a federal court ruling regarding stop and frisk, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with in the news. So we stopped doing that. It turned into, oh, you got robbed? Okay, well, give me your ID, I'll write a report. And that was it. So I guess I would just warn my younger self about that. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's probably the luxury of being here in Georgetown. Not that we don't have calls like that randomly pop through, but I'm there's I don't know, I was spoiled starting and ending my career here with the community that we serve. I mean, we have a lot of retired military, retired law enforcement, EMS, and folks here, and it's just the support of the community is great. And so, I guess the only other thing that I would add to that was that when I first got on patrol, oh my word, all the old school Georgetownians were like, "What? You want to come to my house? You want to eat?" And I'm like, "Do I look hungry?" So I would probably tell my rookie self not to eat all the food that showed up.
Mm. I don't know if that particular question pertains to me, but I in one context, I didn't walk in blinded going into law enforcement in terms of as a chaplain. In fact, I was it wasn't looked upon by some of my colleagues as something I needed to do. I was asked the question. They asked me, "Are you sure? Is this what you believe God is calling you into?" In fact, they began to laugh. And now I'm not going to tell you what I was thinking, but my response was I felt very mature. And I said, "Of course, God called me to this area of ministry because we are needed." And I walked away. So that was when I was 27, 28. So I remember that so well. So hopefully that's the right. The right in answering question.
Sure.
Yourself, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go back over to the screen, and this question got quite a few clicks in terms of voting. And it says, how can officers get rid of other officers that are racist or unnecessarily violent or just bad apples? So it says, how can officers get rid of other officers? But I mean, I think that that could also be broadly construed as like, how can the department get rid of them? Or is there a process? What does that look like if there happens to be someone who maybe has gone through training, become an officer, and then it becomes very obvious that maybe this wasn't a good fit and they are somebody who's very racist or excited about being violent or whatever that looks like? That's a hard question. It's a hard question.
Well, I believe it's going to have to happen in several ways. One, it has to come from I shouldn't say the top, but whoever the chief is or the sheriff is, and then along with the command staff, and then your lieutenants and your sergeants, they really have to be willing to confront the issue. And then also it goes back to your training. It's important. I know right now the sheriff at Travis County made sure that all of her sergeants and chaplains and lieutenants, we had character training. It was a great training on character. And I was able to, for 3 months, take that particular training that I had to apply it to the men and women that I'm ministering to inside. And that was a very, very good training on character. I had gone through a lot of trainings, but this particular training, a lot of positives, a lot of positive responses out of the lieutenants and and captains and everyone who's gone and went through it. It was good. But again, it has to be echoed by many. And I know that's where it has to begin.
Well, I was just going to say, and it really comes back to accountability across the board. And this is just generally speaking for law enforcement across the nation. When you start looking at the training and experiences of individual officers, where they started, where they're going to different places, all that comes into account. And when you have some officers who have not been held accountable in the past, and depending on the agency they work for, whether they're civil service or at will, there's a variety of different avenues that go that can proceed to getting, as the question said, getting rid of those officers. A lot of the time it's perception though, right? And I go back to that just because there's racism and then there's perceived racism, right? And it can be, well, she stopped me just because I'm Black, or she stopped me because I'm Hispanic. She stopped me because I'm white. Okay. Or were you just speeding? You know, what exactly is it? How is the contact? You know, not every contact is going to be pleasant. You know, I still get, you know, people who are like, oh my gosh, you were so nice when you stopped me. Well, here's this is the way I always thought about it. I'm stopping your forward motion. You are trying to get somewhere, right? But are you going to get there in one piece? And how can we get you there safely, right? So if I'm stopping you and you're speeding, okay, why are you speeding? Where are we going? You know, is there a necessity to get there? Because here are the consequences. I always make sure it's an educational piece. A lot of times, especially when I stop teenagers that are new to driving or don't have a lot of experience driving for one reason or another. They may have had their license for 2 or 3 years, but they don't have a car, so they only drive occasionally. I always took it as an educational piece versus, you know, the stern finger shaking and here's your ticket, go about your business. You know, I've had plenty of great conversations on the side of the road with traffic context, but I've also been barked at like a dog as well. And I had to realize that she was having a bad day. It wasn't my fault. I didn't know her, you know, but it goes back to perspective, you know, and is the officer truly being racist? Yes or no? Are they applying to using too great of a force than necessary? You know, when we have officer involved incidents like that, there's a process. It all gets reviewed and to figure out whether or not there was a use of force issue. I think especially now with all the things that are changing with the law that just changed September 1st with unnecessary chokeholds, which is my favorite because the wording is all sorts of wrong. But I mean, the wording and the stuff, I mean, we want to be proactive. It was like Officer Troyer said, being here, we do have the opportunity to be more community-based and community relations driven versus stat driven. You know, does everybody like numbers? Yes. Okay. You know, at the end of the day, yes, it will come down to numbers somewhere, but we do have the luxury to be able to reach out to our community on and at an even playing field. We go to HOA meetings, we go to Boy Scouts, all sorts of different opportunities to be able to meet people where they are, church gatherings, stuff like that. And I think we, Georgetown as a whole I will say is the anomaly, and only because I haven't worked anywhere else as an officer. I've dispatched in San Antonio and in Bryan, but I will say Georgetown is the anomaly as far as when it comes to police and community relations. We are more proactive than places that I've seen in terms of really trying to get out there and really educating the public. So when it comes to making reports and stuff like that, officers, we really need to take care of making sure when we're out on the street with another officer that we are policing ourselves as well. If we see a problem, we need to say something. We need to step in. And per our policy, it even says that, hey, if there's, excessive use of force or something, we see something or we see an officer that's getting a little too invested emotionally in a call. It is up to us that's on the scene to be able to step in and be like, hey, why don't you go on the car and, take that report real quick while I have a conversation with this person, So when we start taking those opportunities to step in and really kind of, I hate using this for the buzzword, but de-escalate the situation, it helps a lot further. You got to do that newspaper front page of the newspaper test. But I think sometimes it gets to the point where we are second guessing ourselves, and then we're not making a decision when we need to. I know that was long. I'm sorry.
It's okay. That's why we're here.
Mhm. Well, I think Delta hit a lot of the main points. I think a big part, we all know maybe not all of us, I know I'm speaking to a large audience here, but Delta hit on it, how supervisors and command staff, they do a lot these days to supervise to a higher degree exactly what officers are doing, especially in the age of body cameras now, reviewing footage on a regular basis, having very strict use of force policies. And I can attest to that because the use of force policy here in Georgetown is far more detailed and in depth than what I had in New York. And I think it's very reflective of the time we live in, where everyone is very concerned with this issue, and I think departments are taking it very seriously, that they don't want to appear to the public they serve as being out of control in any way, whether it's attitudes towards the public like racism or something similar, or excessive uses of force by officers. But one thing that officers can do, us at the worker bee level that are actually responding to these calls all day and interacting with the public the most, I think, is to just continue doing the best we can to having a supportive culture where we look out for each other. And what I mean by that is, if you see a colleague looking like he's approaching doing something inappropriate, losing his temper, perhaps potentially in his use of force getting a little too excessive, we have to not be afraid to get involved and step in. And if that means physically grabbing that colleague and ripping him away from that situation, that's what you do. I find myself very blessed that at the beginning of my police career in New York, I was in a very tight-knit platoon, and we were all good friends and went out together on a regular basis, at least twice a week. And it served us well. We had tight bonds. It served us well in situations like this. I can think of one example where a friend and colleague of ours in our platoon, she was searching a suspect, and the suspect had a needle in his pocket, and she wound up pricking her finger on the needle. Now, this is one of the worst fears of a police officer. Mm-hmm. And that's why often when we search people, we say, hey, do you have anything on you that's going to hurt me? If you have needles, knives, anything on there that's going to poke me, stick me, if I put my hand in your pocket, tell me now. And of course, the worst fear is that it's a needle, because you don't know what diseases that person has, and now it just got transmitted to you. And it is something that's happened in the past in New York, where you're searching a suspect who is likely, a heroin user. You prick his, your finger on his needle. Now you have HIV. It's the greatest fear. And when she got pricked by that guy's needle, she lost it. And she started attacking him, and her partner and other officers present had to pull her away. So it's understandable when you're in a situation because she's probably thinking, I'm dead. This person just killed me. And so when you're in that mind frame, you're probably not too concerned with anything much else. But that's why it's important to have good colleagues that will help you and save you even from yourself at times if you happen to lose control, because we're all human beings. And I think that's something that a lot of people sometimes forget when we're discussing these issues. Cops are human too. And unfortunately, because of the responsibility we have, if we do screw things up, it can have dire consequences for the public, for us, for everybody. So it is very important to I think have strong bonds and have that mind frame. Hey, I don't want to get myself in trouble. I want to make sure none of my buddies get in trouble. And if police officers and agencies foster a culture of that, I think it helps serve the public as well as themselves and makes everybody happy.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like that's more of kind of what Delta was talking about too, with that accountability with each other, accountability,
Exactly.
Yeah. Up, down, sideways, all of it. So, all right. I'm going to see what's going on over here. Our next question is, do you think that there are challenges that you face being an officer of color that your white counterparts do not encounter as much?
I think people forget that we operate on both sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just take my skin off and be like, okay, let me put this up one day. Even when I put my uniform on, I'm still Black, and I think as Officer Troyer talked about earlier with, the different struggles that he dealt with in New York with the constant changing climate, with whatever issues were going on at that time through that 10-year career there. I think that we forget that, or the community, not our community, but in society as a whole, they forget that we're still people. We put on a uniform to do a job. Same as a doctor, same as a lawyer, same as teachers and nurses and everybody else. We put on a uniform to do a job. When we take our uniforms off, we're still parents, we're still children, we're still siblings. And, I will tell you, even when I was still an officer and I'm driving down the road in my own car, there's still some clinching that happens when a cop gets behind me, and it doesn't change. It can be a trooper, we can be in a different city, different town, wherever. It's like, okay, am I doing the speed limit? What am I doing wrong? And I don't think that's ever changed. And I think the worst thing, even prior to becoming a police officer, I think the worst stop I ever had was I rolled a stop sign, and that was the only other interaction I had with law enforcement before becoming an officer. And it was still, holy moly, what did I do wrong? Now, was there ever a fear there that I was going to get drugged out of a car? No. But that also wasn't how I was raised. I was raised on a military base, and we traveled everywhere. And we were more afraid of the MP's dogs, the military police dogs, than the military police themselves. So I think it was just a difference, and at least for me, how I was raised. And we were never taught to be afraid of police. We were told, these people are here to protect you. This is their job, and you're going to respect them. But again, as I aged, as I went through college, it didn't matter. If there was a police officer behind me, I was like, okay, what's the speed limit? I'm 10 and 2. I'm sitting straight, my seatbelt's on, doing all the checks to make sure I'm, doing everything right. And even here, it didn't matter whether I was still working on patrol or, driving around doing something random in an unmarked car. I'm still a Black female. I'm still driving a car. I'm still out in society, and if I'm in, Austin, they don't know I'm a Georgetown police officer, and so it really is, I think, the tendency to think that, well, everybody gets a pass because they're police officers. It's really not a fair a fair deal, you know, because not everybody knows me, you know, not everybody knows Officer Troyer. You know, he's still new to town. He's been on patrol, what he said, 5 months now on your own, you know, and that's going to take a lot of getting used to. He's not used to riding solo. I preferred it because I didn't have anybody else to stink up my car, you know, but we are still people, and we still have some of the same fears, you know, or hesitancies anytime, you know, we get in a car, but being able to flip that switch, you know, okay, now I'm an officer today, tomorrow I'll be off duty. What am I going to do? You know, and Officer Troyer also said that, you know, hey, don't go to this particular place because, you know, they might put something in your water, they might put something in your food. You know, again, we do have that luxury here that's not something we really have to stress out about. Are we still hyper vigilant? 100%. We still sit with facing the door, trying to figure out where all the exits and stuff are. But I think that we have as society, we have a tendency to think that everybody gets a pass who's a police officer, and that really isn't the case. There was that story a while back where it was a soldier, you know, that got pulled over on a traffic stop. I don't remember where it was at, but you know, he got pepper sprayed and all this other stuff, and it was a mess, you know. And whether we are wearing a badge and a blue uniform for our city, or we're wearing a badge or something and fighting for our country, we all do the same job. And at the end of the day, we all take those uniforms off, and we are all normal people. I'm not going to lie to you. I have a lead foot. I think being a police officer made it worse. There's just a need for speed sometimes, you know? And so I do find myself like, oh snap, where am I at? What's the speed limit here? And I know most of the speed limits around here because I've stopped people in this, you know, on different streets here in town. So I know the speed limits, but you know, every now and then I'll get a little lead foot and be like, okay, let me slow down. And I think it's just making sure we do that self-check, to remember that we are not our occupation. We are people. And so I don't know, we are spoiled in Georgetown. Troyer, I don't know if you got a chance to experience all of it, other than all the good food that comes to the PD, but we are very much spoiled here. And we are the anomaly when it comes to how we operate, even with working with the fire department. There's not a lot of places that the police and the fire department get along and work so well like we do here. So it's a self-check.
Delta, are you saying that in Georgetown, firefighters and cops don't get into bar fights with each other?
No, we don't.
Oh, okay.
We save that for other cities. We don't do that in town.
Well, the only thing I can think of that makes the experience of being an officer of color different from the experience of white colleagues is white colleagues every now and again will get a tirade from a suspect or some passerby. Oh, you're a racist. Blah, 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 blah. Well, the reason you're stopping me is because of, you know, the color of my skin, you're a racist. If you're a minority officer, you get those speeches, but you also get the speeches from people saying, basically, you're a traitor. You know, oh,
Yes.
what are you doing? You're harassing your own people. What's the matter with you? Da, 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 da. So I guess if you're not a minority, you don't endure those kind of tirades every now and then from the public. I don't know if that's an issue in Georgetown. I haven't encountered it yet in Georgetown, but in New York, that was something that we would hear every now and again from the population.
Every now and then we'll get one, but it's far and few between.
Okay.
I mean, it's, again, some of it's generational, some of it's just education piece. So we generally don't have to deal with it. Or my favorite, it's people who don't even live here.
Mhm.
Right.
That
Yeah.
want to give you a tirade. Or you get when you have a, a white counterpart standing there, and then you have, the other one, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like,
No.
no, I
Mhm.
don't break the law, but thank you.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and then if you don't side with them,
Mhm.
then you get the other side of the coin. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, well, actually, that you saying that actually reminds me of a scenario I've dealt with 2 or 3 times where some white colleagues will respond to a call, and my partner, who was Puerto Rican, so another minority, we would show up to back them up. And as soon as we got there, the person, who again was a Black neighborhood we worked in, so usually people we would serve were Black or Hispanic. And when we would get there, the person would be like, "Oh, good, I want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to them. I want to talk to you."
Mhm.
Yes.
And we would, as very polite as we could, say, "Ma'am" or "Sir." It doesn't quite work that way. These are our colleagues. We're here too. We're going to listen to what you have to say, but nobody here is going to treat you differently, treat you poorly because his or her race is different from yours, et cetera, et cetera. So you'll have to smooth over those situations. So I guess, just like the examples we've given, that sometimes as a minority you have to endure a couple things that your white colleagues have to endure. Well, I saw firsthand that's one issue, I guess, that a white officer has to endure that we didn't. We never got show up to a call and the person says, "Well, I don't want to talk to you because I don't like your race. I want an officer of a different race." I've never had to endure that. So
Mhm. No, I find it, I know I'm not an officer, but
Mhm.
the, within the context of any facility, correctional facility, or
Mhm.
even if I'm on rideouts, I still have some type of rank, or in a sense of able to speak, especially in certain situations. But I think there are two things I can speak of. When we moved to Rome, New York, which is upstate
Mhm.
outside of Syracuse,
Mhm.
I had my Rhode Island plates, and I was going to pick up one of our children's pets, and I was stopped. And so the officer, I knew exactly what he was going to ask, so I was ready for him. He asked the question. He said, "What are you doing here in Rome, New York, with Rhode Island plates?" And I quickly gave him my license, and I gave him my badge from the prison. And he looked, and I said, "Yep, that's who I am. Any other questions? I'm going to pick up my children's pets who they have not seen in 3 months. Any other question?" He said, "No, sir," and let me go. And the next issue I had was struggling if I was pulled over in Texas, driving from Del Valley or Austin to Georgetown. Do I continue to wear my badge? And I had to struggle with that for several months until I had a experience with God who spoke to my heart, said, "Trust me that everything is going to be fine." And I had to do that because I did not want to continue to live in that type of misery driving. Because when I go, especially when I go and visit central booking, I'm when the officers are bringing the potential, what I call the potential inmate into the facility to be booked in, I'm speaking to not Travis County. I'm speaking to APD. I'm getting to know APD, and particularly the white officers, to get to know my face and to say my name. by the time we finish talking. Because if I am ever pulled over by them, I want them to know who I am. Purposely. Do that purposely. And but I still do it at times. But not as much. But yeah, we're human, and we have to go home, and it's real. Racism is real. It's a real deal. Yep.
So we are getting to the top of our hour. Is there anything that anybody would like to add to kind of take us out and to close the evening? Anything that you feel like maybe wasn't discussed that could have been discussed, or just anything you want to say to kind of to close out or summarize your experience or the evening?
Well, I know I say most, there's a good portion of people that know me. And I'll just say this. I think it's, with today's society and how everything's going, if we just give each other a fair chance and actually everybody just take a breath and have a moment and kind of let things sink in before we react, things would go a whole lot smoother. I have this conversation with my students. And again, I do have the luxury of teaching some of the teenagers that I have arrested in the past. And I've built good relationships with those students. I have one student that goes, "You remember when you arrested me?" Yes, I do. And it's, but it's good because they actually want to come in and talk to me, and they share their struggles, and they want to ask, how they go about navigating their path into adulthood. And so although that I've arrested them in the past, they also still respect me and respect how I did my job and how I'm doing my new job. And so I think that when we establish these relationships and we have the opportunity to see the other side of the coin and see people for who they are and allow us to be ourselves, and we're going to make mistakes. I mean, we're officers, but we're people too. We're still going to make mistakes, and we really need to kind of hold ourselves individually, everybody across the board, to a higher standard. I mean, our integrity, our professionalism, our teamwork, all of those things, our accountability are necessary to move us forward through some of these troubling times, just to make things go a lot better. And again, I'm not just saying we're going to kumbaya and everybody's going to get along, but I think that having the opportunity to take a moment and let the things that we are trying to do for our community to make it a safer place to live, because we do have more people moving from out of state. We do have more people who have different experiences with law enforcement, and those experiences are going to change how they view us, and if we continue to put our best foot forward, as with Officer Troyer, he's getting his feet wet with how we operate and do things down here in Georgetown. But just from the short time of talking, he's doing everything he's got to do. And, trust me, you'll get used to riding in the car by yourself. But I think it goes without being said that we, and I can't say it enough, we live in a very unique community where we are very much spoiled by our retired military and law enforcement and EMS people who are raising some amazing kids and grandkids here. And the people that are moving from out of state are giving us the opportunity to stretch and kind of figure out how, policing all the new people coming in, how that works for them, and not getting them to see the Georgetown way, but getting them to understand that police officers don't operate in whatever way that they operated at where they're from. We all move a little bit differently.
It sounds like everybody could benefit from character training.
Oh, sure.
Officer Troyer?
I would just to piggyback off what Delta said, just to reemphasize, we're all individuals. I think it's human nature to be tribal and to also put people, things, places into groups because it makes it easier to sort our thoughts. But we have to remember that we're all individuals. We've all been raised recently enough that we were all raised that you're not supposed to judge a person by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. Remember that all your fellow citizens, they're individuals. They all have a journey. They all have different experiences. And when you come across an individual, you're supposed to judge him or her based on that person's character. And I think we would also just do well to remember the same with a police officer. We all do wear, uniforms, so we all kind of look like a hive, but we're all individuals too, from different backgrounds, different experiences. And I don't think anyone ever starts out coming into this field saying, hey, I want to be a mustache twirling villain and, go oppress people. We all got into this because we want to help and make a positive contribution in some way. And just bear in mind that's where we're all coming from. And when you have an interaction with an officer, withhold judgment and just be polite and try to be as compliant as possible. I mean, my mom taught me when I was a kid, if you're ever stopped by the police, it's yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am, do whatever they tell you. And if something wrong happened and that officer overstepped his bounds, the way you handle that is after the fact, through legal proceedings. You don't do anything to make the situation worse. So just, including us, because as officers, we go to work every day, and who are we interacting with? Well, we're acting with the police and police supervisors. So we have to navigate that as well every day when we interact with our colleagues and how they handle things and how administration and law affects us and legal system. So it's something that everybody has to bear in mind and just understand that we're all human. So.
Yeah. Quickly, I would just say that we are in a situation where we have to build relationships. Honest and healthy relationships are very, very important. Even to the from the public standpoint, building trust it's critical. I recently just talked to a rabbi who came from Los Angeles, California, had to come and see a parishioner this past weekend. And he informed me that he worked as a chaplain with the Los Angeles, the sheriff's office out in Los Angeles. And the first thing that came to my mind, I said, the first thing that came to my mind, how could you work with the sheriff's office in LA County? I'm thinking of Rodney King. The first thing I thought about. And the rabbi said, we have to build relationships. And every time that I was assigned to a particular deputy, he was afraid that I was going to bring up God or bring up something bad about his character. But when I built the relationship just on pure human relationships, they wanted to see me a bit more because they recognized that they could talk with me. I wasn't there to judge them. I said, good answer, because I wasn't for sure. I needed to hear that. And because you have your thoughts, and so that was just benefiting for me, that I was continuing to be on the right road and building relationships and de-escalating situations. And because of especially within the pandemic that we're in, we really need each other. So, all right.
Thank you so much. I'm so proud to have been a part of this webinar. I am so proud to live in a city that officers were even allowed to participate in a panel like this. I think that there are probably places where something like this couldn't even happen because of a fear, right? That maybe the wrong things would be said. It just makes me really really happy to hear some of the things that you guys have to say about how special Georgetown is. I have been looking at some of the things in the chat, and there's just a lot of thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you so much for your service. We're so lucky to have you here. And I just think that that's a really wonderful expression of gratitude. And I think that you guys are, walking your talk. I think that you're here because you're trying to build community. You're trying to build relationship, and you are trying to, establish, reinforce, and continue that kind of trust. So it's been a real honor to listen to you guys tonight. I have hung on a lot of the words, and I learned a lot. And I really do want to thank you. I know that a lot of the participants are also expressing gratitude.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I told y'all it was going to be casual and it wouldn't be terrible. And some of the questions are hard questions to answer. So we appreciate all of your candor and your willingness. And maybe there's going to be a Cops of Color Part 2 in the future sometime. So that would be great. We had a lot of questions that that didn't get asked. A lot of them were kind of in the same vein. Sometimes toward the end of the hour, the questions tend to overlap a little bit, but there's certainly more that can be explored. And we're super grateful that you guys were here. And
just email them all to Troyer. He'll take care of it.
Yeah. So one last thing in the chat, there is also an opportunity to sign up for our next webinar, which is going to be, we're going to be exploring the kind of differently abled in terms of cognitive ability. So I've heard people use the term neurodivergent. I'm trying to find the exact name of it, blah, blah, blah. Let's see, it said, click here to register for our next webinar, which is going to be Cognitively Challenged Conversations with People and Caregivers. So it's myths and truths about cognitively challenged. So we already have a few people lined up for that webinar. You, the panel's welcome to come back and be a participant and to watch if you're interested, or spread the link around. And we just want to thank you one more time for being here. And I hope you guys have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.